Aliens spent a week torturing her, until a reckless human came to her rescue. The metallic walls of the detention chamber reflected the dim purple light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the cold surface and tried to focus on anything other than the burning sensation that coursed through her nervous system. 7 days had passed since the Krillian raiders had captured her scout ship and brought her to this nightmare of a vessel. 7 days of systematic torture, designed not just to break her body, but to shatter her mind. The Krillians were methodical in their cruelty. They had studied human physiology extensively and knew exactly which neural pathways to target for maximum suffering. Their leader, a tall insectoid creature with multifaceted eyes and razor-sharp mandibles, had made it clear that they wanted information about Earth's defensive capabilities. Elena had given them nothing but her name, rank, and serial number, despite the agony they inflicted upon her. Every few hours, the door would hiss open, and the interrogators would return with their neural disruptors and pain amplifiers. They would ask their questions in their clicking, chittering language, while a translator device converted their words into broken human speech. Elena had learned to recognize the sound of their approach, and would steel herself for what was to come. Her military training had prepared her for the possibility of capture and torture, but nothing could have prepared her for the clinical efficiency with which the Krillians worked. The ship itself was a marvel of alien engineering, though Elena had little opportunity to appreciate its design. The corridors were too narrow for human comfort, and the atmosphere was thick with gases that made her eyes water and her throat burn. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making every movement feel sluggish and labored. She had caught glimpses of the ship's interior during her initial capture, and had counted at least 50 crew members, all of them focused on their mysterious mission. Through the small porthole in her cell, Elena could see the vast emptiness of space, broken only by the occasional distant star. She had tried to identify constellations that might give her a clue about their location, but the star patterns were completely unfamiliar. The Krillians had taken her far from human space, far from any hope of rescue or contact with the Terran Defense Force. Her fellow humans probably assumed she was dead by now, another casualty of the ongoing border conflicts with hostile alien species. As she sat in the darkness, Elena reflected on the events that had led to her capture. She had been conducting a routine reconnaissance mission in the disputed sector when her ship's sensors had detected an anomalous energy signature. Against protocol, she had decided to investigate personally rather than calling for backup. The energy signature had turned out to be a trap laid by the Krillian raiders, who had been hunting human vessels for weeks. Her ship had been disabled in seconds, and she had been beamed aboard their vessel before she could even send a distress signal. The torture sessions had begun immediately. The Krillians seemed to take a perverse pleasure in their work, treating each session like a scientific experiment. They would monitor her vital signs and adjust their techniques based on her responses. When traditional pain infliction proved insufficient, they had moved on to more sophisticated methods, including neural probes that could stimulate specific memories and emotions. They had forced her to relive her worst childhood traumas over and over again, while simultaneously flooding her system with artificial terror. Elena had survived by retreating deep into her own mind, by focusing on memories of Earth and the people she had left behind. She thought about her younger brother, who was studying engineering at the Luna Colony Academy. She remembered her parents, who had supported her decision to join the military despite their fears about the dangerous galaxy humanity was venturing into. She held onto these memories like anchors that kept her identity intact, even as the aliens tried to tear it apart. The worst part was not the physical pain, but the growing realization that her captors seemed to know things about human psychology that even humans themselves had not fully understood. They had access to research data that suggested there were traitors among the human colony's people who had sold information to hostile alien species in exchange for technology or safe passage. The thought that her own species might have contributed to her current suffering was almost more than she could bear. On the seventh day, Elena noticed a change in the ship's routine. The usual hum of the engines had shifted to a higher pitch, and there was increased activity in the corridors outside her cell. Krillians seemed agitated about something, and their normal disciplined behavior had given way to urgent chittering and rapid movement. Elena pressed her ear to the door and tried to make sense of the sounds she was hearing. ***, the human ship appeared on the Krillian vessel's sensors like a ghost materializing from the void. Captain Mark Rodriguez had been tracking the raiders for 3 days using a combination of sensor data and pure instinct. His modified fighter craft was designed for stealth and speed rather than heavy combat, but he had equipped it with enough firepower to make a difference. The Krillians had made a mistake by venturing too close to the asteroid field where Mark had been conducting his own unauthorized mission. Mark was not officially part of the Terran Defense Force anymore. 6 months ago, he had been court-martialed for disobeying direct orders during a rescue mission that had saved 30 colonists but resulted in the destruction of a valuable research station. The military had deemed his actions reckless and irresponsible, but the families of the rescued colonists had seen him as a hero. He had been discharged with full honors, but had been banned from participating in any official military operations. Since then, Mark had been working as a freelance rescue specialist, taking on missions that the official military could not or would not handle. He had a reputation for getting results through unconventional methods, and for never leaving anyone behind. When he had received word through unofficial channels that a human officer had been captured by Krillian raiders, he had immediately set out to investigate. The fact that the mission was technically illegal and that he had no official backing did not concern him in the least. His ship was a hybrid of human and alien technology that he had acquired through various means over the years. The hull was reinforced with materials scavenged from a derelict Andromedian cruiser, and the engines had been modified with components taken from a crashed Zephyrian transport. The weapons systems were entirely human, but had been enhanced with targeting computers that used algorithms developed by the artificial intelligence researchers on Mars colony. Mark had spent years studying alien psychology and tactics, and he understood that the Krillians were creatures of habit who followed predictable patterns. They would keep their prisoner in a detention cell near the center of the ship, where it would be most difficult to reach. They would have guards posted at regular intervals, and would use their superior numbers to overwhelm any rescue attempt. What they would not expect was a single human pilot, crazy enough to attempt a direct assault on their vessel. The asteroid field provided perfect cover for Mark's approach. He used the gravitational pull of the larger asteroids to mask his ship's engine signature, while he positioned himself for the attack. The Krillian vessel was massive compared to his fighter, but its size also made it a larger target. Mark had identified several weak points in the ship's hull where a precisely placed shot could cause significant damage without destroying the entire vessel and potentially killing the prisoner he was trying to rescue. As he prepared for the attack, Mark thought about the woman he was trying to save. Captain Elena Vasquez had been listed as missing in action for over a week, and the official search had been called off after 3 days. The military had concluded that she was either dead or had been taken so far from human space that rescue was impossible. Mark had access to information that suggested otherwise, including intercepted communications that indicated the Krillians were holding a human prisoner for interrogation purposes. The attack began with a series of precision strikes against the Krillian ship's weapons systems. Mark's fighter was equipped with experimental plasma cannons that could penetrate most alien shielding systems. He targeted the ship's defensive turrets, first eliminating their ability to return fire effectively. The Krillians responded by launching a squadron of small fighter craft, but Mark was ready for them. His ship's superior maneuverability allowed him to dance between the incoming fire while picking off the enemy fighters one by one. The battle was fierce but brief. Mark's unconventional tactics and superior weaponry gave him a significant advantage over the Krillian pilots, who were trained for formation flying rather than individual combat. Within minutes, he had eliminated most of the enemy fighters and had positioned himself for a direct assault on the main ship. The Krillians had no choice but to withdraw their remaining forces and focus on defending their vessel. Mark used the confusion to his advantage by launching a boarding pod directly at the ship's hull. The pod was equipped with cutting lasers that could slice through most alien materials, and it was designed to create a temporary breach that would allow him to enter the ship. The Krillians would be expecting him to use the main docking bay, but Mark had no intention of following their expectations. The explosion that rocked the Krillian ship sent Elena tumbling across her cell floor. Emergency lighting flickered on, and she could hear the sound of running footsteps and urgent alien voices echoing through the corridors. Something had gone wrong with the ship's routine, and the crew was clearly in a state of panic. Elena pressed herself against the wall and tried to prepare for whatever was coming next. The sounds of battle filtered through the ship's hull, and Elena realized that they were under attack. The weapon's fire was unlike anything she had heard before, with a distinctive whining sound that suggested human plasma technology. Hope surged through her chest as she realized that someone had come looking for her. The Terran Defense Force had protocols for prisoner rescue, but they required extensive planning and coordination. This attack sounded more like the work of a single pilot operating alone. The door to her cell suddenly hissed open, and Elena prepared herself for another interrogation session. Instead of the usual Krillian guards, she saw a figure in advanced combat armor carrying weapons that were definitely of human origin. The figure's helm, it was equipped with a heads-up display that glowed with tactical information, and the armor itself was covered in scorch marks and alien blood. The figure raised its weapon, and Elena instinctively pressed herself against the wall. Then the helmet retracted, and she found herself looking at a human face for the first time in 7 days. The man was in his 30s, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her condition in a single glance. He had the kind of face that suggested he had seen too much combat and had made too many difficult decisions. "Captain Elena Vasquez, I presume," the man said in a voice that was calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "I'm here to get you out of this mess, but we need to move fast. The Krillians are regrouping, and they'll be sending reinforcements to this section soon." Elena tried to stand, but her legs gave out beneath her. The week of torture had taken a severe toll on her physical condition, and she was not sure she could walk without assistance. The man immediately moved to help her, recognizing her condition without needing an explanation. He produced a small medical injector from his equipment pack and pressed it against her neck. "This will help with the pain and give you enough strength to make it to my ship," he explained as the medication took effect. "We'll get you proper medical attention once we're safely away from here, but right now I need you to focus on staying conscious and following my lead." Elena felt a surge of energy as the medication entered her system. The pain that had been her constant companion for the past week receded to a manageable level, and she found that she could stand without difficulty. The man helped her to her feet and handed her a sidearm that he had taken from one of the fallen Krillian guards. "Do you know how to use this?" he asked while checking his own weapons. Elena nodded and tested the weapon's weight in her hands. It was heavier than human firearms, but the principle was the same. The man seemed satisfied with her response and gestured for her to follow him toward the cell door. "My name is Mark Rodriguez," he said as they prepared to leave the cell. "I know this is not exactly a standard rescue operation, but I promise you that I will get you out of here alive. The Krillians have underestimated human determination, and they're about to learn why." That was a mistake. Elena followed Mark into the corridor and immediately noticed the signs of battle. Krillian bodies littered the floor, and the walls were scorched with weapon fire. Mark had clearly fought his way through significant opposition to reach her location. His movement was fluid and confident as he led her through the ship's maze-like corridors, avoiding the main passages where they might encounter enemy patrols. The ship's emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, and Elena could hear the sound of damage control teams working frantically to repair the systems that Mark had damaged during his assault. The Krillians were clearly unprepared for this type of attack, and their response was chaotic and uncoordinated. "How did you find me?" Elena asked as they moved through a junction that connected several corridors. "I have my sources," Mark replied without elaborating. "The important thing is that we're here now, and we have a narrow window of opportunity to get you off this ship. The Krillians will be calling for reinforcements, and we need to be gone before they arrive." Elena wanted to ask more questions, but she could see that Mark was focused entirely on the task at hand. His movements were precise and economical, as he navigated the ship's interior with the confidence of someone who had studied the layout extensively. Every few minutes he would pause to check his equipment, or to listen for sounds that might indicate the presence of enemy forces. The path to Mark's boarding pod led through the ship's main engineering section, where the Krillians had established their primary defensive position. Mark knew that this would be the most dangerous part of the rescue operation, but it was also the most direct route to their escape. The alternative would be to try to fight their way through the ship's upper levels, where they would be more likely to encounter large numbers of crew members. As they approached the engineering section, Mark signaled for Elena to take cover behind a bulkhead while he assessed the situation. Through his helmet's enhanced vision, he could see at least a dozen Krillian warriors positioned behind makeshift barriers. They were armed with energy weapons that could easily penetrate his armor, and they had the advantage of superior numbers and defensive positions. Mark considered his options carefully. A direct assault would likely result in both of their deaths, but there was no other way to reach the boarding pod. He would need to use every advantage he had, including his knowledge of Krillian psychology and his superior equipment. The key would be to create enough chaos and confusion to allow them to break through the defensive line. He pulled out a series of concussion grenades from his equipment pack and showed them to Elena. "When I give the signal, I want you to run straight toward that access panel on the far wall," he said, pointing to a location that would provide cover once they were past the initial defensive line. "Don't stop for anything and don't look back. I'll be right behind you." Elena nodded her understanding and prepared herself for what was to come. She could see the determination in Mark's eyes and knew that he would do everything in his power to get her to safety. The fact that he was willing to risk his own life for someone he had never met spoke to the kind of person he was and the values that drove him. Mark activated the grenades and threw them into the engineering section in a pattern that would create maximum confusion among the defenders. The explosions filled the air with smoke and debris, while the concussive force temporarily disoriented the Krillian warriors. In the chaos that followed, Mark and Alina charged through the defensive line, using the smoke as cover. The Krillians recovered quickly and began firing their energy weapons in the direction of the escaping humans. Mark returned fire with his plasma rifle, while shielding Alina with his armored body. Several energy bolts struck his armor, but the advanced materials absorbed most of the impact. Alina reached the access panel and dove for cover, while Mark continued to engage the enemy forces. The battle was intense, but Mark's superior training and equipment gave him a significant advantage. He used the engineering section's complex layout to his advantage by moving between cover points and engaging the enemy from multiple angles. The Krillians were skilled warriors, but they were not prepared for the unconventional tactics that Mark employed. Within minutes, Mark had eliminated most of the defenders and had cleared a path to the boarding pod. Alina followed him through the engineering section, staying low and moving quickly to avoid any remaining threats. The boarding pod was exactly where Mark had left it, attached to the ship's hull like a metallic parasite. "This is it," Mark said as they reached the pod's entrance. "Once we're inside, we'll have about 30 seconds before the Krillians realize what's happening and try to stop us. The pod systems are already online, and the engines are ready for immediate departure." Alina climbed into the pod and was amazed by the sophisticated technology that Mark had managed to pack into such a small space. The interior was cramped, but functional, with acceleration couches and life support systems that would keep them alive during the journey back to human space. Mark sealed the entrance and activated the pod's launch sequence. The pod detached from the Krillian ship with a violent jolt that threw Alina back into her acceleration couch. Through the small porthole, she could see the alien vessel growing smaller as they accelerated away from it. The Krillians were firing their weapons at the pod, but they were too late to prevent their escape. "We're not out of this yet," Mark warned as he piloted the pod through the asteroid field. "The Krillians will be launching pursuit craft within minutes, and we need to reach my ship before they can intercept us. The pod has limited defensive capabilities, and we won't survive a prolonged chase." Alina watched through the porthole as Mark's fighter craft came into view. It was unlike any human ship she had ever seen, with a hull that seemed to blend elements from multiple alien technologies. The ship was small, but it radiated a sense of power and sophistication that suggested it was far more dangerous than it appeared. The docking procedure was completed in seconds, and Alina found herself aboard Mark's ship for the first time. The interior was a fascinating blend of human engineering and alien technology, with systems that seemed to have been integrated through pure ingenuity rather than formal design. Mark immediately began the launch sequence while Alina strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Welcome aboard the Wanderer," Mark said as the ship accelerated away from the asteroid field. "She's not much to look at, but she's fast, and she's never let me down. We'll be back in human space within 6 hours, and you'll be receiving proper medical attention before the day is over." Alina felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that her ordeal was finally over. The past week had been the longest of her life, but she had survived, and she had been rescued by someone who had risked everything to save her. As they entered hyperspace and left the Krillian ship far behind, Alina allowed herself to believe that she was truly free. The journey back to human space gave Alina time to process everything that had happened and to learn more about the man who had saved her life. Mark Rodriguez was unlike any military officer she had ever met, and his approach to combat was refreshingly unconventional. He had clearly studied alien psychology and tactics extensively, and his ship was equipped with technology that was years ahead of anything the Terran Defense Force possessed. "You're not military anymore, are you?" Elena asked as they traveled through hyperspace. Mark shook his head and smiled grimly. I was discharged 6 months ago for conducting an unauthorized rescue mission. The brass didn't appreciate my methods, but the people I saved seemed to think I did the right thing. I've been working independently ever since, taking on missions that the official military won't touch. Elena was intrigued by Mark's story and wanted to know more about the circumstances that had led to his discharge. What happened during that mission? She asked. Mark's expression grew serious as he recalled the events. There was a research station in the Proxima sector that came under attack by raiders. The station had 30 civilian researchers and their families, but it was also home to a classified weapons development program. When the attack began, the military command ordered all available ships to protect the weapons research and to evacuate the civilians only if time permitted. Elena could already see where the story was heading. You chose to save the civilians instead of the research. I did what I thought was right, Mark replied. The weapons could be replaced, but those people couldn't. I managed to get everyone off the station before it was destroyed, but the research data was lost. The military court ruled that I had disobeyed direct orders and had compromised a vital military asset. Elena found herself admiring Mark's decision and the principles that had guided his actions. The fact that he had been willing to sacrifice his military career to save innocent lives spoke to the kind of person he was. The Terran Defense Force had lost a valuable officer when they had discharged him, but their loss had been humanity's gain. So now you work as a freelance rescue specialist? Elena said. Mark nodded. I take on missions that the official military can't or won't handle. Sometimes it's rescuing people from hostile alien territory, and sometimes it's dealing with situations that are too politically sensitive for official intervention. The pay is inconsistent, but the work is rewarding. Elena was curious about how Mark had learned about her capture. How did you know the Krillians were holding a human prisoner? She asked. Mark's expression became evasive. I have contacts throughout the galaxy who keep me informed about situations that might require my services. When word reached me that a human officer had been captured by Krillian raiders, I knew I had to investigate. The official search had been called off, but I don't believe in leaving people behind. Elena suspected that Mark's sources were more sophisticated than he was letting on, but she decided not to press the issue. The important thing was that he had found her and had been willing to risk his life to save her. The details of how he had acquired his information were less important than the fact that he had acted on it. As they continued their journey, Elena learned more about Mark's ship and the modifications he had made to it over the years. The Wanderer was a hybrid of human and alien technology that had been assembled through a combination of salvage operations and black market acquisitions. The hull was reinforced with materials that were virtually indestructible, and the engines could achieve speeds that exceeded anything in the Terran Defense Force fleet. This ship is incredible, Elena said as she examined the control systems. How did you manage to integrate so many different technologies? Mark smiled with obvious pride. It took years of work and more than a few favors from people who knew how to work with alien technology. The AI system is based on research that was conducted on Mars colony, but it's been enhanced with algorithms that I acquired from a trader who had contacts with the Centauri Republic. The weapons systems are entirely human, but they've been upgraded with targeting computers that use quantum processing. Elena was impressed by the sophistication of Mark's operation. He had managed to create a ship that was more advanced than anything the military possessed, and he had done it without any official support or resources. The fact that he was using this technology to rescue people rather than for personal gain made his achievements even more remarkable. What will you do after you deliver me to the authorities? Elena asked. Mark shrugged. I'll wait for the next mission to come along. There are always people who need help, and the official channels aren't always able to provide it. As long as there are humans in danger somewhere in the galaxy, I'll be there to help them. Elena found herself wanting to know more about Mark's plans and his motivations. "Have you ever considered working with the military again?" she asked. "I'm sure they would be interested in your capabilities if you were willing to follow orders." Mark's expression hardened slightly. "I've learned that following orders isn't always the same as doing what's right. The military has its place, but I prefer to make my own decisions about who to help and how to help them. I'm not interested in being part of a system that would sacrifice civilians to protect weapons research." Elena understood Mark's position and respected his decision to remain independent. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were situations that required the kind of flexibility and quick thinking that Mark possessed. The military's bureaucratic structure and rigid command hierarchy were not always suited to the kind of missions that Mark specialized in. As they approached the edge of human space, Elena felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She would soon be back among her own people and would be able to receive the medical attention she needed. More importantly, she would be able to report on her experiences and provide valuable intelligence about Krillian capabilities and intentions. "There's something I need to tell you," Elena said as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace. "During my captivity, I learned that the Krillians have access to information about human psychology and defensive capabilities that suggests there are traitors among the colonies. Someone has been selling information to hostile alien species." Mark's expression grew serious. "That's disturbing news, but not entirely surprising. The galaxy is full of people who are willing to sell out their own species for the right price. Do you have any idea who might be involved?" Elena shook her head. The Krillians were careful not to reveal their sources, but they knew things that should have been classified. They had detailed information about human neural pathways and psychological vulnerabilities that could only have come from someone with access to military research data. Mark absorbed this information thoughtfully. "I'll make sure that gets passed along to the right people. The military needs to know that their security has been compromised, and they need to take steps to identify and eliminate the source of the leak." Elena was grateful that Mark understood the importance of her intelligence and would ensure that it reached the appropriate authorities. The threat of traitors within human society was almost as dangerous as the external threats they faced from hostile alien species. The Terran Defense Force station at Kepler Base was a sprawling complex that served as the primary military installation for the outer colonies. As Mark's ship approached the station, Elena could see the familiar outline of human warships and the reassuring sight of the Terran flag flying from the station's main tower. After her week of captivity, it was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. The station's traffic control system immediately challenged their approach and demanded identification. Mark transmitted his credentials along with a priority message indicating that he was carrying a rescued prisoner who required immediate medical attention. Within minutes, they were cleared for landing and escorted to the station's main docking bay by a squadron of patrol fighters. Elena was met by a full medical team as soon as Mark's ship touched down. The doctors immediately began treating her injuries, while debriefing officers questioned her about her experiences. Mark remained near by throughout the initial examinations, making sure that Elena received the care she needed and that her intelligence was properly documented. The base commander, Admiral Patricia Morrison, arrived within an hour of their landing. She was a stern woman in her 50s who had built her reputation on her ability to handle difficult situations with both diplomacy and force. Elena had worked with Morrison before and knew that she was someone who could be trusted with sensitive information. "Captain Vasquez, I'm relieved to see that you're safe," Morrison said as she entered the medical bay. "We had feared the worst when your ship was reported missing. "How are you feeling?" Elena was still weak from her ordeal, but she was determined to provide a full report. "I've been better, Admiral, but I'm alive thanks to Mr. Rodriguez. The Krillians held me for 7 days and used sophisticated torture techniques to try to extract information about our defensive capabilities. I gave them nothing, but they seemed to already know more than they should have." Morrison's expression grew grave. "We'll need a full debriefing as soon as you're medically cleared. Any information you can provide about Krillian capabilities and intentions will be invaluable. We've been seeing increased activity from their raiders, and we need to understand what they're planning." Elena glanced toward Mark, who was standing quietly near the entrance to the medical bay. "Admiral, I need to stress that Mr. Rodriguez risked his life to save me. He conducted a single-handed assault on a Krillian vessel and successfully extracted me from captivity. His actions were heroic, and he deserves recognition for what he did." Morrison turned to look at Mark with obvious interest. "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand that you're no longer part of the Terran Defense Force, but your actions on Captain Vasquez's behalf have not gone unnoticed. Perhaps we could discuss the possibility of reinstating your commission, or at least establishing some form of official cooperation." Mark shook his head politely. "I appreciate the offer, Admiral, but I prefer to remain independent. I'm more effective when I'm not constrained by military protocol and bureaucracy. However, I'm always willing to share information that might be useful to the defense of human space." Morrison seemed disappointed, but not entirely surprised by Mark's response. "I understand your position, and I respect your decision. If you ever change your mind, please know that there will always be a place for someone with your skills in the Terran Defense Force." Elena spent the next several hours providing detailed reports about her captivity and the intelligence she had gathered about Krillian capabilities. The debriefing officers were particularly interested in her observations about the aliens' knowledge of human psychology and their apparent access to classified research data. The possibility of traitors within the human colonies was a serious concern that would require immediate investigation. As the medical team finished their examinations, Elena learned that she would need several weeks of recovery time before she could return to active duty. The torture she had endured had caused significant physical and psychological trauma that would require careful treatment. The base's medical facilities were excellent, but the healing process would be slow and difficult. Mark remained at the base for 2 days to ensure that Elena was receiving proper care and to provide his own report about the rescue operation. He shared detailed information about Krillian ship design and defensive capabilities that would be valuable for future military operations. His insights into alien psychology and tactics were particularly appreciated by the intelligence officers. On the morning of his departure, Mark visited Elena in the medical bay to say goodbye. She had been moved to a private room where she could rest and receive visitors. The doctors had assured her that she would make a full recovery, but that it would take time and patience. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did," Elena said as Mark entered her room. "You saved my life, and I will never forget that. If there's ever anything I can do to repay you, please let me know." Mark smiled and shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Captain. I did what needed to be done, and I'm glad that you're safe. The galaxy is a dangerous place, but it's people like you who make it worth defending." Elena felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for the man who had risked everything to save her. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Mark shrugged. "The galaxy is a big place, but our paths might cross again someday. Until then, take care of yourself and get back to doing what you do best. The Terran Defense Force needs officers like you who are willing to put themselves in danger to protect others." Elena watched from her window as Mark's ship lifted off from the docking bay and disappeared into the stars. She knew that somewhere out there he was already planning his next mission and preparing to help someone else who needed his unique skills. The galaxy was a safer place because of people like Mark Rodriguez, who were willing to risk everything to do what was right. ***, 6 months later, Elena had returned to active duty and was commanding a new scout ship on patrol missions along the border with hostile alien territory. Her experience with the Krillians had made her more cautious, but also more determined to protect human space from alien threats. The psychological scars from her captivity had healed, but the memories remained as a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness between the stars. The investigation into the security breach that had compromised classified information to the Krillians had led to the arrest of 3 traitors within the colonial administration. The discovery that humans had been selling information to hostile aliens had shocked the entire Terran Defense Force and had led to a comprehensive review of security protocols. Elena's intelligence had been crucial in identifying the source of the leak and preventing further damage. Elena often thought about Mark Rodriguez and wondered what missions he might be undertaking. She had tried to keep track of his activities through unofficial channels, but he seemed to have disappeared into the shadows of the galaxy. Occasionally she would hear rumors about impossible rescue missions or mysterious attacks on alien raiders, but she could never confirm whether Mark was involved. The Krillian threat had diminished significantly after the loss of their raider vessel and the exposure of their human collaborators. The aliens had retreated to their own territory and had ceased their aggressive incursions into human space. Elena suspected that Mark's successful rescue mission had dealt a significant blow to their intelligence-gathering capabilities and had forced them to reconsider their strategy. As she sat in the command chair of her new ship, Elena reflected on the lessons she had learned from her ordeal. The galaxy was indeed a dangerous place, filled with hostile aliens and treacherous humans who would sell out their own species for personal gain. But it was also filled with heroes like Mark Rodriguez, who were willing to risk everything to help others and to stand up for what was right. The human spirit was resilient and unbreakable, no matter what challenges it faced. Elena had survived torture and imprisonment because she had refused to give up hope and had maintained her faith in her fellow humans. Mark had demonstrated that individual courage and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds when it was guided by moral principles and a commitment to helping others. Elena knew that there would be other threats and other challenges in the future. The galaxy was vast and filled with unknown dangers that humanity would have to face. But she also knew that there would always be people like Mark who would rise to meet those challenges and who would ensure that humanity's light continued to shine in the darkness. The stars stretched out before Elena's ship like an infinite ocean of possibilities. Somewhere out there, Mark Rodriguez was continuing his mission to help those who needed it most. And somewhere out there, new threats were emerging that would test humanity's resolve and determination. But Elena was confident that humanity would prevail because it possessed something that no alien species could understand or defeat: the unbreakable human spirit and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of others. As her ship continued its patrol, Elena smiled and looked forward to whatever challenges lay ahead. She had been tested in the fires of adversity and had emerged stronger and more determined than ever before. The galaxy might be dangerous, but it was also full of hope and possibility for those who were brave enough to explore it and strong enough to defend it. The rescue that had saved her life had also reminded her why she had chosen to serve in the Terran Defense Force in the first place. There were people out there who needed protection, and there were values worth fighting for. As long as there were humans like Mark Rodriguez in the galaxy, Elena knew that humanity would never surrender to the darkness and would always find a way to bring light to even the most desperate situations.